Howdy y'all, Editor JT here. Before we start today's episode, I just wanted to stop by and inform you that my co-hosts have been hard at work in my basement, sweatshopping away at bringing you some of the best merch we've ever made. Satisfy your consumer habits, give yourself over to your most primal capitalist desires, and buy through the link below. We've got mugs, shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, all you need to get through the impending nuclear winter with maximum drip. We've got pockets on Kara, Kissinger and his Hell Buddies, unhinged Deprogram album art, and much more. This limited edition drop ends exactly 30 days after this announcement. So consume fast and consume hard as you support the show in return for some communist drip. As always, patrons have a 10% discount. Check out the store at deprogramshop.com. And now, back to the show.
Alright, boys, I have a very important thing to tell you. I need to inform you of the hospital banana. Are you aware of the hospital banana?
The hospital banana?
Is this related to the hospital sandwiches?
No, I mean loosely. The hospital sandwiches I'm technically not supposed to be able to take, even though I do. I know the code to where they keep them.
Is the hospital banana how you stack the dead bodies so they take as less space as possible?
Jesus, Murphy.
Sadly
Curved?
not. Sadly not.
No, you package them in squares. You break the legs in the
exactly
head.
right, like the gluten-free oat cookies, where you put they have the plastic dividers between. Anyways, no, the hospital banana is, I guess it's part of a privilege that we have. They bring us a basket with some fruit, like on occasion. It's not every day, and it's very hit or miss fruit. By the way, they bring like out of season tangerines and shit. That it sucks.
Nice.
But sometimes you get bananas, and I don't know why I prefer bananas for working. I guess it's the potassium. I don't know. They're good. They're filling, and it's not a messy fruit to eat.
Me and JT really know that you prefer bananas, and Alan
exactly
the time.
Particularly your boys bananas, and Alan is the guest star of all my daydreams. Speaking of which, by the way, I'm the one who for better or worse use of words, penetrated into your dreams in the guise of that poor woman who wanted to shut up about my videos. But the inverse is you're a frequent guest star in my dreams, and there's also a banana, and there's a hospital involved, and I do some sucking and kissing and whatnot.
Jesus Christ! Continue with the banana story.
Okay, now what I'm trying to tell you is there's this one banana for some reason that's always at the top of this basket, and I like take it at the beginning of my shift thinking I'm going to eat it throughout the day, and I put it on my desk and I go see patients, I do all this bullshit, and then at the end of the day I'm like, I actually don't want this banana, so I take this one individual banana and I go and I put it back at the top of the thing, the pile of fruit, and then I come back the next day and the banana's still there. I'm like, yeah, today will be the day that I eat this banana.
God,
it's like a novel by Kafka, basically. My life with this fucking banana. I'm just taking it clocks in with me, and then afterwards I'm like, I don't want it, and I put it back, and it's been like 5 days.
You're preventing some poor schmuck from getting their dose of potassium. Like, oh, there's a banana there, I'm going to get it later, and you snag it, and then you don't eat it.
No, it's guys, it's capitalism that causes alienation, and because of alienation, you don't get hungry, and then you don't eat your banana, basically. So the banana keeps staying, and it keeps rotting, just like your soul under the system, bro. Yeah, and then one time you eat the banana, it's so rotten that you get like a psychedelic effect, and then it unlocks class consciousness in your mind. Socialism is inevitable, brothers. Yes.
Stop it. It's a banana. You don't even have to sit down to eat it. It comes in its own packaging.
I genuinely don't ask. I don't know why I have such difficulty. Maybe you goes on to something. Maybe there's genuinely some subconscious commentary, political commentary with the banana.
What color is this banana by now?
It was a unpleasant green, and now it is a tart yellow.
Okay.
Oh, well, if anything, you should wait until it gets a few spots on it, and it'll get it even sweeter.
Exactly right. Just like your kisses on my cheek.
Oh, what? It's moving from like casual flirtation to borderline sexual harassment. I apologize to our guest.
It's the fourth date. It's okay. It's the fourth date.
Yes.
Exactly right. That is true.
Many things can happen.
Hold on. This is a banter topic I've been meaning to ask you boys about for a while, but the situation has presented itself, and Alan is here. So this has nothing to do with you, Alan, unless you want it to have something to do with you. But I have two native English speakers here, and you Upney, who's fantastic in English. Can you please explain to me what the fuck the difference between edging and gooning is?
Oh, God.
What are these words?
Basic man, you have not lived. JT, please take this, because I will go into a rage, okay? This man has not lived, okay?
I think you're probably going to go into a rage anyway, because I'm an old boomer. humor, but okay. To the best of my ability to discern the difference between these two fine pastimes, edging is you have the end goal is to bust, correct?
I see.
But the part of the fun is to prevent it for as long as possible, right?
I see. Okay. Yes.
Gooning.
And then gooning.
Honestly, I know there's a goon cave involved. I know there are like multiple monitors involved usually, right, you Gopnik? But you're gonna have to tap in on this one.
Gooning is just letting your brain melt away in your insane, over-sexualized, perverted addictions, right? So, like a gooner is referred to a person who just faps all the fucking time. It's that guy. That's the Wojak, the guy with an incredibly muscular right arm, but like a barely working left arm that's still in his wife beater completely.
Wife
like
respecter.
you can't differentiate what paint is, what coloring is, and what's his own jizz on the thing. A person who's just completely obsessed with gooning, aka fapping to things. Okay. But a goon sesh you can do with your bros. So you get in a group and then you goon to a particular thing together. It's a great team building exercise. It is reminding ourselves of the collective nature sometimes of sexuality, not necessarily the hyper individualized mentality we ascribe to it due to the alienating nature.
Oh my God, we're back on alienation.
But yeah, that's basically like edging is kind of a process, a mechanic. Gooning is a lifestyle. yeah, and you can Google
with your
bros.
I don't know how much or how familiar you guys are with the world of English football, but there's a very famous team, Arsenal, here, and our fans are all called Gooners, which is a very long. It's a very long-lived nickname for their fans, and they've got a ton of celebrity fans, including, I think the best one is probably Osama bin Laden. So we can say officially that Osama bin Laden is a gooner.
Okay, there we go. That is a hard-hitting geopolitical analysis we come here for.
I have no idea, but is that related to Arsenal directly? Because The Guardian recently posted on Twitter that Anne Hathaway is finally happy now or something. She's become a gooner. And everybody lost their shit like, Guardian? I'm not sure you know what that means. So is this like an Anglicism that we're all missing that has nothing to do with, I don't know, being obsessed with pleasuring yourself, to say it in the most like civilized way? Or is it just connected to Arsenal and Anne Hathaway likes Arsenal? Mark? I'm confused.
I mean, Arsenal, of course, they were started by people who worked in the military arsenal in London, and they've got a big cannon on their crest, and they're called the Gunners. So I think the Gooners comes from there. But of course, Great Britain is a nation of perverts and paedophiles, so you never know when their double entendre is deliberate. You know.
I just re-googled it. Yes, Anne Hathaway became an Arsenal fan. Okay, is a secret Arsenal fan, and
they knew what they were doing.
Okay,
they
I
knew
see.
what they were doing.
You think so? The person that the person that posted it is under the age of 40, so they might.
There you go. You see,
the Guardian trying to be relevant by saying, "Man, Anne Hathaway do be gooning, man."
Please, JT, if you can find this, you can finish this little segment off with Finkelstein going like gooning.
Yeah, sure.
There's an expression, I don't know if they coined it or whether it's a commonplace in your generation. The expression is gooning.
Well, howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the Deprogram. You piggies asked, and we have provided. Today we have with us the one and only Alan MacLeod, brilliant journalist, a shitposter supreme, and fan favorite, coming to claim his 4th appearance challenge coin. Alan, thank you for coming on, and please tell any listeners who somehow missed the last 3 episodes a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, it's fantastic to be with you. Now I've got that 4th appearance challenge coin. I've also unlocked the privileges on the Discord and everything. And let me tell you guys, you've got to be in there. It's just incredible there. In just 5 minutes, I've seen like Ugopnik's face reveal in there. There's an audio of Hakeem praising the French, and there's also exclusive JT feet pics in there. So you've got to get down there, subscribe, patreon.com/the Deprogram. That's where it's at.
It's all true.
This is the best pro we've ever done.
Yeah.
My name's Alan MacLeod. I'm the senior staff writer and podcast producer over at Mint Press News, which is a small alternative media website that really looks to shine a light on the military-industrial complex, the permanent war economy, and US imperialism in general. We do a lot of work on the US and the Middle East. Me, myself, I guess my role is really investigating sources of power in my investigations, which would be things like governments, big corporations, big tech, and just the powerful in general. And I guess I feel very lucky that I've been able to do that job for a number of years now. And of course, you can also catch me over on social media. I'm probably most terminally online on Twitter. You can find me Alan R. MacLeod.
And it is a genuine privilege to have you for the fourth time. There's two reasons why we are milking Alan so much. Three reasons. Because he's very smart and has something to say. Because he's a great journalist. And number three, because eventually they're going to fucking kill him. So we got to get him on for as many times as possible before he's found with 7 bullets at the back of his head. No, I'm kidding. I hope that doesn't happen, of course. I just gave Alan some dreams to dream tonight. Holy fucking shit. After it left my mouth, I realized that I must scream. But let's start with a bit of a personal story. You work closely with, as you said, Mint Press News, as most of our audience should know. And recently you've been pretty much blacklisted from most social media sites, likely due to your coverage of the genocide in Gaza. Can you tell us the whole story? What the fuck is happening?
Working in alternative media is certainly fraught with dangers. I recently did a talk at a university in America called something like The Problems Facing Alternative Media Journalism Today, and I could just see the blood drain from the faces of the students and even the professor as I droned on and laid out how much crap we have to deal with, most of which comes from the government and from big social media companies. The long and short of it is that there's a silent and invisible war waging online against those who are trying to show people the reality of the genocide in Gaza. So Mint Press has been banned from TikTok, and we've had our PayPal account deleted, including with significant amounts of money still in there. We've had 2 GoFundMe drives cancelled by the platform, who then banned us entirely. One contributor, Kit Kleinberg, was arrested in the UK under an anti-terrorism bill, and the reach of our social media accounts has been drastically limited. So, for example, since 2016, we've lost more than 90% of our Google traffic and over 99% of our Facebook traffic. A lot of that stuff does predate October 7th and was probably likely related to our coverage of other hot zones like Ukraine or Syria or Venezuela. But it's really the same story all over the time. When you challenge the narratives and the official positions of Western governments, you get treated like that in Western media and by Western corporations. On a personal level, my Twitter account was shut down in January by Mr. Free Speech, Elon Musk himself. And it was only after so many people kicked up a huge stink online that it was reinstated, including, embarrassingly, by a lot of the worst people on the platform. I got banned from PayPal in 2022 as well, very likely at the orders of Nina Yankovic, who was, if you remember, Biden's short-lived and extremely cringe disinformation czar. But this sort of treatment is really hardly unusual. In fact, it's pretty much par for the course for people working in independent media or challenging power in some way. Every time Israel ups the violence in Palestine, social media platforms suddenly start restricting or banning Palestinian or pro-Palestinian voices. Nelson Mandela's grandson's Twitter, for example, just happened to be suspended right after he flew to Turkey recently to be on board that Freedom Flotilla aiming to deliver aid to Gaza. Meanwhile, I was reading over on Medium, one writer was discussing how since October 7th, his earnings on Medium have totally cratered, with the message clearly being shut the fuck up about Palestine. That was what he said. We know why they're doing this. These big tech platforms are intimately connected to the US and, in fact, Israeli national security, the states there. They use their leverage to shut down messages they don't like. I've talked about this on previous episodes, I think, but my work, probably the work I'm most noted for, has been to use employment sites like LinkedIn to catalog how Google, Facebook, Twitter, and other platforms have started to employ literally hundreds of quote-unquote former CIA agents to run their algorithms and to be in charge of content moderation. One great example of this is Aaron Berman over at Facebook. If you go to meta.com/about us or something, you'll see a video of Aaron there. He is talking about Facebook and more generally Meta's content moderation guidelines, about how he has to make very tough decisions and he always wants to err on the side of free speech, etc., etc. But what he doesn't tell you in that little video is that he is actually a CIA agent, or at least he was until 2019 when he left his job being one of the most senior ranking CIA agents out there. He literally wrote the president's daily briefs for Obama and Trump, and he just got parachuted right into the top of Facebook and is now the face of content moderation there.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I also published an investigation showing how companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft and Amazon have hired hundreds of former members of the notorious military intelligence agency Unit 8200. And they're the kind of people that decide what the world sees and what it doesn't see. And when that comes to Gaza or any other issue, that's a huge problem. In fact, when you have former CIA guys deciding that sort of stuff, it's tantamount to state censorship on a global level. For people in media, I mean, I'm sure you hear people constantly online saying, I'm being silenced, etc. And it's very boring to hear. But it is true that, unfortunately, Facebook, Twitter, Google News, and platforms like that are really the lifeblood of how you get your message out in modern society. People are on their smartphones and, you know, these gigantic corporate behemoths, they really constitute bottlenecks. They're filters on what the public hears and doesn't hear. And long term, we really have to do something about that. So we've been deranked, delisted, demoted, and deleted because of our coverage of Gaza and elsewhere. But at the same time, I really don't want to sound like I'm complaining too much. And we have to keep this in perspective because, of course, this is as nothing as what's happening to Palestinian journalists, for example, of whom I believe 142 have been killed while covering the onslaught. And that's just a small segment of the tens of thousands of people who have been killed in this genocide.
That is why it's additionally important just for us to use our platform as well to push as many people towards Mid-Press News and Alan himself. If you would like to support what they do, our show genuinely and fully endorses you in doing so. You will find the links below in the description. It would be not only a shame, it would be a fucking sin to minimize the potential outreach that real journalists like our boy right here not being able to push the good word forwards. This is obviously a part of a bigger picture, and to no one's surprise, one you painted pretty well yourself in an article titled USAID's Disinformation Primer, Global Censorship in the Name of Democracy, back in March, I believe. There you talk about a concerted effort by the extended hand of the US State Department, USAID, to push for regime change and pro-status quo, the so-called traditional media landscape, and for it to continue. Now, we'll just cuddle up in our warm pajamas by the fire, and you tell us this horror story, please.
Quite recently, a group of lawyers managed to obtain, under the Freedom of Information Act, a 97-page USAID document that lays out a plan of action about how USAID, a government organization, wants to prevent people from finding information online that challenges US government positions. The document calls, for instance, for regulating video games and online message boards, steering individuals away from alternative media and back towards more elite-friendly sites like Fox News or CNN, and for governments to work with advisors to cripple organizations that refuse to toe the line, the official line, and they'll do that by cajoling and intimidating advertisers to pull out of sponsoring these or just putting ads on these websites. And this is all, by the way, done under the guise of fighting fake news, of course, which
Classic.
is kind of how the last, 8 years of modern talk about this situation just goes on like this. So anyway, USAID lays out what it sees as 3 types of bad information in this report, which I'll remind you was never meant to see the light of day. It was for internal use only. They say misinformation, which is just false information spread by those who believe it to be true. Disinformation, which is false information proliferated with the intent to deceive. But the most interesting category is the third one, what they call malinformation. And that's speech or info that's factually correct, but inconvenient for the US government and for the people at the top of society. Yeah, it's this category that should really alarm people the most. It reminds me of other leaked Western government documents I've seen, stating about how hard it is to counter foreign disinformation because so often that foreign disinfo is factually correct. And the USAID primer states that actually foreign governments are not the source of the most problematic information. Instead, it usually originates from what it calls, quote, networks of alternative sites and anonymous individuals who have created their own alt media online spaces, end quote. So, in other words, that basically means alternative media like Mint Press and platforms like Reddit and Discord, which the report specifically takes aim at, claiming that the public can develop what they call, quote, populist expertise, end quote. And
Class consciousness.
Yeah, exactly, to challenge what they see as the official truth. And one of the chief methods for combating this dangerous trend is what they call advertiser outreach, which basically boils down to threatening advertisers into cutting ties with those platforms and websites in order to choke them of their income and kill them off. And USAID says that it will also even redirect funding to higher quality news domains, which of course means the likes of cable news, CNN, the New York Times, etc. They also, and this was an incredible phrase they use, they also aim to, quote, psychologically inoculate, end quote, the population by essentially attacking the messengers of bad information, which boils down to probably smearing alternative media sites and platforms like Reddit, Discord, and 4chan by presenting them as whatever. I mentioned earlier that the CIA are deeply embedded into Silicon Valley platforms, but former USAID officials also have top jobs there too. Mike Brado, for example, he left his job as the Deputy Director of Policy at USAID in 2020 to become a misinformation policy manager at Meta, which is the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. And I can only imagine if this were happening, for example, with Russian officials leaving somewhere like the FSB, the KGB, and being dropped into Silicon Valley corporations where they, decide what is true and what is not. If 1/100th of this sort of thing was found happening at TikTok, it would have been shut down long ago. Another reason why this is such a worrying development is USAID isn't some neutral organization, but it's actually one of the largest sources of fake news and misinformation anywhere in the world. An example of that is in 2021, the organization attempted to foment a color revolution, i.e. a pro-US insurrection in Cuba. USAID interfered in Cuban politics. They've devised so many schemes, it's incredible, including infiltrating the country's hip-hop scene and attempting to organize it as a revolutionary or counter-revolutionary anti-government force. And USAID even secretly created a Cuban social media app called Zunzuneo. None of the app's tens of thousands of users were aware that this was actually being paid for by the US government and had been secretly designed to provide them a really good service at first, but then slowly drip feed them anti-government messages to the point where at some point the app would tell them, everyone's meeting in the main square, go out there, we're overthrowing the government. So from moment one that was going on, that's the sort of thing that USAID does. It was intimately involved in the 2002 coup in Venezuela as well. So these guys are bad guys and they're pushing for regime change politically, but they're also pushing for some sort of like media regime change as well, but in the media landscape, where they're trying to force out what few voices really remain that talk openly about US imperialism and challenge the consensus, and are trying to shoehorn people back towards safe media like Fox News, CNN, and the New York Times. So more and more people need to know about this.
No, what struck me the most is the not to be one of those, but the Orwellian doublespeak speak that they have, like, oh, so this is misinformation. And the entire idea of misinformation, just from the beginning, that, oh, this person's former like CIA asset put into Meta to control all these other social media networks or to influence policy and whatnot, to quote-unquote combat malinformation. I don't think there's been a single point in my life where misinformation, has been more widespread.
Yeah.
These people are doing a dog shit job. And I don't mean specifically, their purpose is only to divert away from the, geopolitical, economic, political topics. This is what they want people to not cover. But all the other misinformation is fair game. I don't know if you've been online and seen things about nutrition, basic medical stuff. Not that this is my field, right? So that's why I noticed this. But genuinely, I've never seen nearly as much. So it's very opaque, transparent, what they're trying to do. They don't give three shits about actual misinformation that might hurt people. They care about just whatever's not convenient. Exactly like you said, what's not convenient to the status quo for the United States or for United States capital and foreign policy interests.
I mean, it's always just wrapping it in a package. The only reason they are arguably even talking about classic misinformation, intentional or not, is because that's how the policy can be pushed more easily. Because hey, this is about fake news first, and then U.S. national interest second. It's just an easier pill to swallow in the off chance, which in this case became reality, that these documents get leaked and people actually start talking about them. And sometimes, like, pushing this through, for example, getting people quote unquote truly canceled, truly deplatformed, by not allowing them to finance their operation and therefore by cutting their lifeblood, it's a relatively easy process to do, because on all of these platforms, including these platforms themselves, as Alan beautifully put, they live off of advertising revenue. And you can cut out advertising revenue literally by just sending a fucking email to the appropriate person in for example, marketing department of a particular company. You can have a very big, nice collage of, for example, if we're talking about Reddit, of where your diaper company has been advertising underneath posts that are either, for example, pornographic or encourage hate speech, etc., etc. And 95% of like marketing directors that are already in their 60s, just to input a little bit of ageism on my side, seeing this will immediately pull out of said platform. You add to that email that also here is a contact to the marketing person over at MSNBC if you want to, refunnel that money and make even more money by advertising at a proper place, and you have a win-win. If you don't want to do that, you can just bombard them with plenty of anonymous emails that are reporting on anonymous emails that are snitching that your ads are being placed in branding inappropriate places, and if you CC the proper people, almost every fucking executive will shit bricks and immediately move advertising out of the platform. What I'm trying to say is they have so many tools, easily accessible tools at their disposal to fully limit your ability to make your operation financially sustainable, or God forbid, actually allowed to grow. While, as Hakeem said, companies like, for example, the Daily Wire, only I believe in 2021, had a $100 million profitability, not revenue, which I can only imagine by 2024 what levels it has reached. Quite literally a platform of mass misinformation and hate speech, right? But which directly tells us that these policies are combating anti-imperial mentality, class consciousness, call it whatever you want, first, and then combating fake news, not second, but 55th, right? And you get the situation that we're in.
What strikes me most about this stuff is that it's simultaneously more banal and more insidious than one would initially expect. Like you hear the stuff with the making the app for the Cuban people to overthrow the government. It's like that is mind-bogglingly insidious to the average person, but then you boil it down, it's like, well, why are they doing this? It's not some secret evil cabal. It's just, it makes sense for U.S. empire, for the maintenance of hegemony. Like, it boils down to the same thing every single time, whether it's misinformation, whether it's color revolutions, whether it's proxy wars. It's all the same thing, and you get tired of hearing that as the explanation, but then I don't know, then you see how deeply creepy it all is too, like landing the CIA bigwigs into Silicon Valley apps. It's like these tentacles spread very, very wide and deep into every facet of our modern society in a way that is incredibly boring and predictable, but also like, goddamn, what are we supposed to do about this,
Yeah, like the whole conversation when we started talking about banning TikTok, and we were having all these conversations. Oh, it could be a reason A, it could be a reason B, it could be a reason C, and people will be like, well, maybe it's because there's too many videos about the Palestinian kids having their legs blown off, and most of people's reaction was like, yeah, probably one of the reasons, but that's so in your face. There's no way. That's so in your face. There's no way somebody called up some senators and executive U.S. branch members and said, get this fucking thing delegalized or you're not getting money. There's no way that could have happened. What the fuck? Remember that 3-4 months ago when we were like, that's so cliche. Like, dude, read a fucking book. What the fuck are you talking about? And yet, this is the reality we exist in. It's like fucking, like, the other day, there's a fucking Met Gala and all these rich people are showing off outfits as the fucking genocide is raging on, and as beautiful fucking student protesters are right at the gates of the same gala, and you're like, dude, I know I'm being cliche as fuck, but like Hunger Games, it's right there. Like, I cannot go back and watch Hunger Games anymore because like, this is not fiction.
Well, it was inspired by the book, the Iraq War thing. Like, it was inspired by that.
Kind of like reality. Like, she was watching, she was switching through channels, and the Iraq War was starting, bombs, tanks, and so on. Switches to our next channel, and it's a reality TV show with a bunch of like good-looking people fighting over $1 million prize in a house.
I think I'd like to stick with the TikTok thing. Or at least a tendril of it. I'm sure at this point everyone has heard about the anti-Semitism bill that's on its way to the U.S. Senate. It's pretty resoundingly unpopular here in the States. Alan, could you talk a little bit about what this means for protest and education surrounding the genocide? What kind of precedent is this bill setting?
Well, it's extraordinary. I mean, the United States is famously enshrined freedom of speech and freedom to protest into its constitution, into its Bill of Rights. But this is carving out a massive exception for Israel and Palestine here. They're trying to basically equate criticism of a foreign government, specifically Israel, with racist hate speech, which has to be stopped. And of course, the United States isn't some sort of country which is fastidious in stopping racist hate speech or rallies of, of like white nationalists or whatever. Certainly when it comes to right-wing racism, I mean, there was a big march in Texas recently of people flying the Confederate flag, going down main streets of businesses. So it's clearly got nothing to do with that, and it's all about trying to start restricting the levels of protest that will inevitably be happening as a dying empire starts to crumble. And that's what we're seeing. The United States doesn't have that sort of hegemony, not even militarily, but certainly not socially, that it once had. around the world, the US, public opinion of the US has dropped. There was a recent poll that showed in 42 out of the 43 countries, opinion of the US had dropped, especially when it came to Southeast Asia, where the majority of people there now favor siding with China over the US for the very first time if there was some sort of conflict or economic conflict, not necessarily even a military one. So what we're seeing really is, in the bigger picture, an attempt to shut down protests that the people in the US who are at the top of the system really don't want to see grow and foster and thrive. And it has been extraordinary seeing exactly how big some of these protests are and so how disciplined they are as well. There's not really been any fighting, any rioting. A lot of these encampments going around all of these universities all over the place are really, again, fastidious and making sure there's no drugs or anything there which might undermine their message or allow police officers to come in and, wreck stuff. So they've done an absolutely great job in trying to raise consciousness. And we're seeing that with Palestinians holding up signs and making videos saying thank you for protesting. And I think, just on an aside, whenever you see your actions are really pissing off people in power and, really freaking them out, that's probably a good sign that you should keep doing those things because they seem to be working.
No, I completely agree. It's so obvious why they're doing the things that they're doing, but they try to create this legal scaffolding to kind of lend it legitimacy. And I always say this, I'm very much a broken record, but if the USSR or any other socialist country historically would have done the same thing, it would be taught to fucking fifth graders all around the world to this day, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't do this. They didn't do this bullshit with the misinformation. They didn't do this, the sheer amount of surveillance, the sheer amount of this two-faced doublespeak bullshit that's always that they always accuse the socialist side of doing historically, as well as they continuously accuse us of doing. And particularly this shit, which is, there's something we don't like, we want to stop it, but we can't just stop it because we pretend to have some sort of legitimacy based on our institutions, so let's set up a bullshit legal scaffolding just to go after this one little thing, right? And then, use that to basically justify all their subsequent actions.
Yeah.
Really, it's and it doesn't, another thing is, they don't realize that this anti-Semitism bill, in a funny way, actually, strengthens a lot of anti-Semitic points that some people have that are wrong. Israel, for example, does not control the United States. Jews do not control the United States. Zionists are not a cabal above, controlling all American politicians. No, Israel is like a military outpost and a recipient of basically military technology for on-the-field testing that they can't do anywhere else, plus an economic and investment outpost for other, Western capital in a largely volatile region that these powers and bits of capital have difficulty entering. Israel is basically the 51st state of the United States, not because Israel controls the United States, but because the United States sees a lot of use in its continued existence. That's why, for example, historically, there's been several instances when the United States, when their interests are really crossed, they, smack them across the face and tell them, hey, don't do this, or we're gonna, do X, Y, Z. We're gonna stop giving you the weapons that you need. We're gonna stop funding you, blah, blah, blah. But trying to pass through a bullshit bill where it's we've never cared about racism ever. More African Americans are dying and being shot in cold blood on the street than ever. There are more school shootings than ever. There's more active and unpunished, blatant expressions of racism than ever in the United States. In systematic forms as well as in just public media forms, and nothing is done against that shit. But when it comes to this particular and specific ethnic group or religious identification, all of a sudden they want to pass this along, and then all these racists will look at this and be like, oh, see, this is exactly what I told you, the Jews control everything.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if the protesters really were racist, then American cops would love them and would probably be joining in.
Exactly right. That's the best.
Brilliant combination that I called the ultimate cop shit sandwich is they get sent to a campus, and there's young people there that did two things in life. They cared about justice, which if you do, you cannot become an American cop. And number two, they're not fucking stupid. They're at the university, which you cannot be to become a fucking cop. So you send these piggies right at the physical amalgamation, or whatever the fucking yank term is, of everything they hate, and what the fuck do you expect them to do? It's just like additionally, the state, the monopoly on violence, they will always fight against anything that questions the status quo and the imperial dogma, etc., etc. But also, like, cops and students protesting against genocide, if there is like a human yin-yang that we could put on a scale, and they would exist on the absolute opposite, that like if they touched, the universe would converge in on itself, that is those two categories.
Yeah, you're right. And one thing that I think is also important to note here, Hakeem kind of touched on both aspects of it, the race aspect and the legal aspect. Throughout history, all around the world, but in the United States is what I'll focus on here, there have been instances of things that became law that were nonetheless not correct. Legal does not mean right. Illegal does not mean wrong. So to take an example, what Rosa Parks did on the bus was illegal. That did not mean she was wrong. What she was doing was correct. The law was wrong. That's the same thing we're seeing here with the students and protesting against Israel's genocide. So it's, and this is not to say like we're not condoning illegal acts. We're not, we here at Deprogram, we neither condemn nor condone anything. We've never done that in our lives. We're perfectly neutral in every aspect here at the Deprogram. But just to bear in mind, the legal system exists for a reason, and that is not to pursue justice.
Absolutely. And this is a great pathway into using the fact that we have a journalist on the show to talk shit about, well, journalists. I literally saw you retweet Pulitzer awarding the New York Times for Best International Reporting of the Year, and I almost fell off my fucking chair. But let me not be an annoying, unprofessional podcaster shit-talking the respected men and women over at the New York Times. Could you please tell us just how astronomically they've been fucking up with their coverage of the Palestinian plight? Recently, of course, we'd need like 20 hours to cover the last 80 years.
Sometimes I think these awards are really just set up to give people like us aneurysms, because when it comes to Gaza, the major story of the past year, the New York Times has been home to some of the most deceptive, blatantly deceitful and pathetic journalism anywhere in the world. The Times has published such banging headlines like "Lives Ended in Gaza" or "At least 9 killed as tank rounds hit UN shelter. I wonder who did it. Nobody can possibly figure out this difficult conundrum." Or stuff like "Disastrous convoy was part of new Israeli effort to hand out more aid to Gaza." That's talking about the Flower Massacre, where Israel shot, I believe, 700 people, including 100 people who died. In fact, more than 100 people. So the Times has been at the forefront of trying to deceive and trying to cloud the issue of what's going on in Gaza and make things that are very simple to understand very difficult to understand. And one example of this is the extraordinary thing where they changed their headline twice from "Israeli strike kills hundreds in hospital," Palestinian officials say. They changed it to "At least 500 dead in strike on Gaza hospital," Palestinians say. So they removed the Israeli part, and then they changed it again to say "At least 500 dead in blast at Gaza hospital," Palestinians say. So now it's not even an airstrike. We can't even infer that from our own background knowledge. That headline where it says "blast at Gaza hospital," that's the headline of something that happens like if it's a gas explosion or something, not a deliberate war crime being carried out by a key ally of the United States. The New York Times also, of course, published that notorious "Screams Without Words" article that claimed fraudulently and without any evidence that vast numbers of Israeli women had been raped. To write that story, they hired an Israeli intelligence officer with zero journalistic experience, who herself admitted later that she had to ask her colleagues to just teach her the very basics of reporting. And she also said that she was told in no uncertain terms what the story should be about and was pushed to make it as gory and shocking as possible. The story was obviously bogus from the start and even caused an internal revolt at the Times, which led to Swartz being pushed out. But the point of the article was really to justify Israeli atrocities that came afterwards. And that's exactly what the Times has been doing since then. And it's a concerted, deliberate effort from the top down. We saw recently that there was a leaked memo from New York Times management that instructed its reporters not to use words like genocide, slaughter, or ethnic cleansing when reporting on Gaza. And in fact, they're not even allowed to use words like refugee camp, occupied territory, or even Palestine in the reporting. Now, I'd ask you, how can you accurately tell any story about Palestine without using those words? Yeah. That's the point. You're not meant to. It's a directive from head office to deceive readers and carry as much water for Israel as possible. The Times, of course, does use words like slaughter and massacre, but essentially only when Israelis die. So there was a study of the paper's coverage that found that Israeli deaths were described as such 22 times, but Palestinian deaths only once. So there's a 22-to-1 disparity there. And let's not forget the fact that the New York Times literally owns a house in Jerusalem that was stolen from an ethnically cleansed Palestinian family during the Nakba. So the Times has been trash on Palestine since forever. That's why it publishes articles with titles like Palestinian Lives Don't Matter, or the absolute perfect 10 out of 10 classic, Missile at Beachside Cafe finds patrons poised for World Cup. That was just
oh my god,
just perfect. And yeah, its Palestine coverage is symptomatic of a wider issue. The Times was crucial. It was maybe the #1 outlet that pushed the Iraq war, and it's supported virtually every coup the US has ever carried out, whether that's in Iran in 1953, where I remember the editorial said that they were sending out a warning to any other nation that goes, quote, berserk with fanatical nationalism, end quote. That was 2 days after Mossadegh had been ousted by the CIA and replaced by a dictator in the Shah. Or, of course, in Chile in 1973, they very much supported the fascist coup that ousted Salvador Allende. They said that no Chilean party or faction can escape some responsibility, but the heavy share must be assigned to Dr. Allende himself when he persisted in pushing a program of pervasive socialism for which he had no popular mandate. And it goes on. And it goes on till the present day. It supported the coups in Venezuela and even pushed for more coups around the world. And that's what the Times is. It's basically the mouthpiece of the US national security state. And in fact, in 2019, I should say, the New York Times even admitted that it sends stories to the Pentagon and other US agencies before they're published so they can be edited and modified by people in Washington. So yeah, that's what you're reading when you see the New York Times, the mouthpiece of the rancid corporate state. It's trash and we should treat it as such. And everyone who works there deserves to be shot from a cannon into a big pool of used diapers. And it's, yeah, I mean, the Pulitzers is frankly a joke. These are an award for flatterers of the court, and we shouldn't take them seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the Nobel Peace Prize, like actually doing good journalism, like doing good activism or doing good organizing. Nobody in power is going to give you a prize for that. So yeah,
you will get one. Yeah. You'll get one from the CIA Achievement of Excellent Journalism with a bullet to the back of the head.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the Empire's not going to reward you for doing good stuff by challenging it, and the Pulitzers are no different.
Going back to the to your work on Gaza, and all of our work on it actually, is I've been curious about this recently because I've been having a bit of a hard time with it. Like, I'll open Twitter and I'll just instantly get amazingly depressed and angry, just overwhelmingly angry. I think how other journalists or educators or content creators deal with the stuff we're trying to show people, right? Because it's hard enough to have to watch all the horrific videos coming out of Gaza, but then to have to try to convince ignorant people to care, that's really disheartening. So while we've got you here, what is your approach as a professional, as a proper journalist? Do you feel like you just have to suck it up and do the work? What do you do?
Well, yeah, I mean, some people, you do get slightly numb to it after like the 400th time you've seen, an Israeli sniper just headshot a Palestinian baby or whatever. Yeah. But I guess you can find meaning and purpose in actually trying to get messages out there to a wider audience. I wouldn't really recommend to just watch these clips over and over and do nothing about it. I mean, you should really be using this as something to spur you on to doing something, whether that's organizing a protest or talking to people or trying to change opinions, or like what I do, like doing journalism about it. So I think that would probably be my message, is that don't let that just sit in you. Let it sort of push you towards actually doing something productive.
And that's something that a question that I've gotten a lot on some of my videos, because the last several have at least tangentially been about the genocide, is people are like, this is awful. What do we do? And I guess that is the answer, is you just have to do something. And I'm so proud of all the kids at the universities and now high schools too, getting in on this, going to protest, standing up to their administrations if they're invested in Israel or weapons manufacturing or whatever. That's great. That's something that I wouldn't have expected even, a few years ago, right? Like with our generation, with millennials, we wouldn't really have done that, at least not in these numbers. So it is quite heartening to see Gen Z, and I guess now probably some of Gen Alpha as well, getting involved like this. That's really cool to see, and it's very promising, I think.
It is. And now that we've fired up our juices, as one would say, let's talk U.S. international terror organizations. What a segue indeed. We're talking about students on campuses, which, if we listen to, the U.S. State Department, are basically international terror organizations. That's why the segue makes sense. Let me start by quoting the beginning of a great article of yours from April. Quote, while ISIS-K has claimed responsibility for the Moscow shooting, Russian President Vladimir Putin has suggested that the United States might have been behind the attack. Although he provided no evidence for his claim, it is true that ISIS and the United States government have a long and complicated relationship, with Washington using the group for its own geopolitical purposes, and that former ISIS fighters are active in Ukraine, as Mint Press News explores. So, tell us a bit more about this story, and why is it magically, oh so magically, that ISIS-K keeps hitting U.S. adversaries at every turn?
Yeah, so one of the lesser reported things in the West about ISIS is how so many leaders in the Middle East consider it to essentially be a proxy or cat's paw of the US government. Hamid Karzai, for example, the former president of Afghanistan, said that I do not differentiate at all between ISIS and America. And the Syrian government is currently and constantly demanding that the US end its open support and funding for ISIS. And there are all sorts of unsubstantiated stories going around there about ISIS fighters being ferried around the region in US Chinook helicopters. We'll likely never know the specifics of the relationship between the US and ISIS, but certainly the US has funded, armed, and trained all manner of radical Islamic conservative militias. In the 1980s, it spent $2 billion training and raising an army of jihadists in Afghanistan, which included, of course, Osama bin Laden. How did that work out? And going back, it's constantly favored working with religious conservative groups over secular nationalist ones, or even democratic forces, and of course, not leftist ones. I'm talking about, for example, the Saudi monarchy. The West supported the Muslim Brotherhood against Nasser in Egypt in the 1950s. There's a good book on this specifically about British role in this, but it's more generally the case that the West has done this. It's called Secret Affairs, Britain's Collusion with Radical Islam. It's by Mark Curtis. So ISIS, as soon as the US pulled out of Afghanistan, ISIS started carrying out a whole number of attacks against the Taliban and against the civilian population in general, which is kind of suspicious if ISIS is supposedly this sworn enemy of the United States. It's now attacking Russia, which is, of course, one of the biggest geopolitical rivals to Washington. But it's not really attacking other nations in the region that, for example, have a very good relationship with the United States. Primarily Israel. In fact, once in 2017, ISIS actually apologized to Israel after its fighters mistakenly launched a mortar attack on an IDF position. And that was because the IDF had penetrated so far into Syria that they didn't realize it was actually the Israeli military and not the Syrian military that they were attacking. But there we go. So, yeah, the US has got a complicated relationship with ISIS. Of course, it did drop the mother of all bombs on it in Afghanistan, and it did claim that it was constantly fighting ISIS in Iraq. But at the same time, it's almost as if ISIS does the United States bidding a lot of the time. So that's why I ended up saying, yeah, the relationship is very complicated indeed. Just like how so many of these, terrorist groups the US is supposedly fighting across the Middle East, you start looking into their origins and your hair starts standing on end.
We have a dedicated episode on that, actually. Bonus episode, I think we did, about the origins of these particular movements. But yeah, you're completely right. The TLDR is that all these, or the majority of these movements are highly artificial, and usually take advantage of already imperial designs in the region, deprivation of certain ethnic groups or other sectors of society that are either excluded from political power or economic development, or some other sort of discrimination, and then they kind of like piece together an artificial movement with a legitimate grievance to create a semi functional organization that usually, exactly like you said, does the bidding seemingly of just the United States, and seems to attack only the people that the United States doesn't like. Meanwhile, everybody who is on good terms really doesn't have to deal with any of the stuff, very interestingly. The thing that I guess is most irritating about all this is that the blowback of the actions of these American created groups usually goes back onto regular countries and regular people who have never had anything to do with these movements. Yeah. And a lot of this is like the rampant Islamophobia that followed the ISIS nonsense all across the world. I remember, do you remember the clown shit when in Paris, I don't know, they blew up something or they shot up something, I don't remember, and like basically every Western world leader ever went to Paris and they all held arms and walked through the street. Do you remember that nonsense?
Wow.
Yeah. But for Palestine,
nightclub, we all changed our Facebook profiles to have that French flag in there.
Yeah.
Oh shit! Why did you unlock that unfortunate core memory? Oh god.
Yeah, and then you have, when it comes to Palestine, no, nothing. In fact, everybody would have a Freudian slip where they'd be like, "Oh yeah, Israel has a right to genocide. I mean to to self-defense." And people, or on the other side, people being so illegitimately careful or ridiculously selective in the way they would word, like, "Oh, this humanitarian pause, they should cease." And then, do you remember what's his name, the Canadian guy? Trudeau. Mm-hmm. When they were discussing, I don't know if people remember, for a time there was talk of a humanitarian pause because they weren't allowed to say ceasefire.
Yeah.
They were like intelligence agencies across the Western world basically told people, do not say the word ceasefire. There were directives sent to news agencies, and they said you cannot write the word ceasefire. You cannot even promote the idea of a ceasefire. And I remember one video of Trudeau. If you look it up, you'll see where he has he's trying to dance around the word, but he's basically trying to say to cease hostilities and stop, and he was like, "Oh, they should cease the firing of," just tripping over his fucking words. It's so stupid. All right, moving on. I think we can move to a slightly, I guess, more funny topic, hopefully at least, which was the coverage of the retaliation by Iran to the Israeli attack, the illegal Israeli attack on the Iranian embassy in Damascus, which happened a few weeks ago now at this point. The coverage was funny, at least to me, because it started with the 99% intercepted, which now, last week, they admitted that it was less than 25%. That was actually intercepted. While they sent basically things that cost $5,000, these drones that cost $5,000 a pop. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Israel collectively spent more than $1 billion. I've seen estimates as high up as $2 billion in just one day against that attack. The non-retaliation also from Israel, in which basically supposedly they claim to have attacked Iran, where they flew what seemed to be an Amazon drone over one base and nothing really happened. And of course the US promising Israel, "Oh, you can have a little Rafah genocide episode if you back down from any more attacks attacks with Iran. My question to you, Alan, is how did you experience this entire episode, the comedy of the reporting of this, plus all the weird fear-mongering and like racist stereotypes? Oh, Iran needs to be completely isolated from the world stage. This is how a rogue nation acts, blah, blah. I'm like, where is this fucking tune when you're... Oh, my God. Yeah, please tell us how you experienced this.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, some of the stuff that you saw coming out of that, it was like, you know, just media outlet after media outlet. I'm talking about corporate media, establishment media, of course, published articles with titles stuff like, you know, world waits for an Iranian attack on Israel. It's like, motherfucker, Israel just bombed the Iranian embassy. It was just ludicrous that we're not even talking about this. And in fact, when they were forced to acknowledge it, outlets like the New York Times ran ludicrous headlines like, Israel just bombed an Iranian embassy. Is that allowed? It's like, what? I mean, imagine...
that's when we ask the question. Sorry, please.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if Iran just like freaking dropped a bomb on the Israeli embassy in DC. Would everybody just be like walking around scratching their heads like, is that cool? Yeah, I think, is that fine? No, everybody would obviously know that that was a war crime. But suddenly we switch in Israel or the United States or another Western nation, and suddenly everybody's like, what a puzzling conundrum. Yes. It was very funny to see the US and Israel spending billions of dollars trying to knock down these like pretty cheap drones, which apparently were some of the Iranian arsenal's least sort of slowest and least powerful drones that they had. And I think Iran has in general been quite conservative in their response. It seems like both Iran and the United States didn't really want this to escalate further. I think Benjamin Netanyahu would probably be very happy if it did escalate further. There would be a few in Washington that also thought that, but yeah, I mean, the reaction, of course, was what we'd expect from Western leaders, which was to ignore the Israeli attacks and then just focus and condemn Iran for their response. And, you know, we saw that from, you know, the Prime Minister of the UK, the leader of France, from Joe Biden as well. It's this ludicrous double standard, which I think all of us should come to expect. In terms of the media, of course, it launched thousands of ridiculous takes. The most ridiculous one probably was that Thomas Friedman article where he was like, understanding the Middle East by, what was it? Let me just check. Understanding the Middle East through the animal kingdom, he wrote.
Oh,
he
yeah.
said that the US is... Remember that? Remember he said the US is like the lion, which is, of course, the king of the jungle, as opposed to the garden where the West is, according to that EU head, Joseph Borrell, I think his name was. And he said that Iran is a parasitic wasp that injects its eggs into live caterpillars. And the live caterpillars in this were Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria. So the message is, of course, that the United States is king and all our opponents are subhuman vermin and parasites. And, you know, people barely batted an eyelid at that. It's just extraordinary, the sort of racism that can come out when, you know, a liberal is scratched.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Hey, well, you know what? The one thing that's been made plentifully clear, I don't even know if that's a word, plentifully.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm surprised. Thank you.
Proud of you.
Habibi. It's that, as always, like Stalin got a lot of things wrong, but he got two things dead right. And it's number one, you scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds. And number two, that social democracy is the moderate wing of fascism. These two things. I mean, but most exemplified in Germany, modern day Germany.
Damn, it's wild. We're just watching German police go ham on all these like Jewish German protesters and like arresting them and like cracking heads and stuff.
Yeah.
And they're being like, we are being anti-racist here.
Absolute classic. And when it comes to absolute classics, absolute embedded cultural classics, let's end today's episode.
Let's end this edging session.
Yeah, this edging session. Let's end this edging session in an absolute Alan classic. Alan, your top 10 favorite, or should I say least favorite, manipulated article titles that covered the ongoing atrocities committed by the OEF in Gaza.
Damn, okay. Well, let's start with one I saw just a couple of hours ago from the Wall Street Journal. It's called A Plan for Palestinian Prosperity. Eventually, Israel should build weapons factories in Gaza and the West Bank.
Oh. What?
God. How do they even argue that?
That is an American's plan for how Palestinians will eventually get to sort of middle income status, which is by building the weapons Israel will use to attack probably other countries as neighbors. So it's going to become like a sort of, I don't know, imperial outpost of Israel.
And this is after the 80 years of reconstruction that the state will need to function again, yeah.
Well, we'll build the weapons factories first, and then we can
build a shanty town around it.
Yeah, exactly. Did you see the one from the New York Post, which was titled, "College students aren't getting enough sex, so they're turning to anti-Israel protests"?
My God.
Oh, in that case, celibacy based, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, sex
based.
is cool, but have you ever protested an apartheid regime?
Yeah.
Well, how are they arguing this? What is the thesis there?
Well, basically, I mean, you could say that all these college students are just, gooning too much, and they're just, getting so frustrated, and they're just not busting that this is really like turning them into like.
Edging,
angry.
Alan, goddammit, edging. The other term. They're edging too much without
you're
busting.
just describing this podcast, honestly. Anyways, go on.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think the argument is, well, if you were getting laid, you'd be more chilled out and you wouldn't be finding things to get annoyed about, like
like genocide.
It's some fake thing that's not happening 10,000 kilometers away.
Do you know, there's this fantastic quote, everybody's heard it, but it's paraphrasing, it's basically liberals are for every civil rights movement except the current one, and for every student protest except the current one, and they're against every war except for the current war. Current war.
Yeah.
It's this shit over and over again. Yani, how do people not realize that the United States in the past 15 years has had a dozen Tiananmen squares and nobody gives a shit? There's none of this propagandistic nonsense around it. There's none of these continuous and never-ending mass rallies on the streets and protests and student or campus protests as well at the same time. It gets to a point of, ideological disassociation. Right?
Yeah.
Where at one point you speak to a liberal and he'll in the same breath tell you, oh, China this and Iran that and this bullshit. But within the same bullshit, right, also condemn the local things going on within the country, the local movements. Or at the very least try to do the bullshit two sides. Like, oh, well, maybe we can just kill half of them. But yeah, sorry. Go on to the next lovely.
Sure, okay. Another one I saw and prepared for you was from a Jewish newspaper, and it's called "We Have Nowhere Else to Go." And, it's the classic argument that Jewish people cannot go anywhere else because they will be basically genocided if they're not a majority. The problem with this is it's written by Alla Umansky, who is a writer who lives in Atlanta, and it seems that she's only lived in Atlanta pretty much her whole life. So I don't think she's even Israeli, and she's writing this shit. You couldn't make it up.
That's also just the straight up white replacement myth too. It's like, we're being replaced, and that's you're like, okay, that's bad because are minorities treated worse somehow? Okay.
Nobody's asking. First, if she was Israeli, I believe. I agree with you. I don't believe that she. I don't think she is if she's living in the United States. But yeah, settler. One settler or another settler doesn't matter. But nobody's asking you to leave Israel, even as a Jewish person. They're only asking that it be a actually democratic state where everybody has equal rights before the law. It's generally not a difficult fucking concept to grasp.
But no. Have you, Hakeem, considered Holocaust? Have you considered?
Exactly.
Oh fuck!
My favorite thing is how they're now engaging in Holocaust denial, or basically what's equivalent of Holocaust denial arguments, where they're trying to connect basically what's going on in Palestine, not the actual ongoing and verifiable genocidal acts against the Palestinian people with clear intent, with overwhelming evidence, right? That's not what they're trying to parallel. No, they're trying to say that the incredibly measured and minute attacks against mostly Israeli military positions.
Hakeem, again, with all this shit. Don't you know that Adolf Hitler changed his name to Adolf Hitler from Abdul Khalil? Okay.
Oh my God.
See, there you go. I can't argue with this. I've been debunked. All right, I'm done for.
But I think the worst part about that headline is the fact that what was it? We have nowhere else to go. That sounds a little bit more like the people in Rafah to me, honestly.
Hold on.
Yeah.
How many Israelis have dual citizenship? Hold on. Oh my god. About 10% of the population. 10% of the population. I bet you. How much money would you put on the vast majority of the ruling strata within Israel being within this 10%? Yes. I mean, all the local mayors and all the people of the Knesset and all the top military fucking people, all the top business people. Every one of these motherfuckers is not like, it's not that they have nowhere else to go. It's the exact inverse. They actually have probably more than one place that would gladly take them. Yeah. And again, that's not even being asked of them. Fuck.
Yeah, I mean, certainly someone like Benjamin Netanyahu, right? I mean, he speaks with a Philly accent. He grew up in the United States, right? He grew up in Philadelphia. Or Naftali Bennett, the former leader of Israel as well. He's born in California too, right?
More exciting to stay in someone else's home and take their land than it is to go back to Cleveland.
There's a Newsweek article. It's titled, "What's behind the surge in Israelis seeking EU citizenship?" I wonder, hold on, if it's so easy for you, Mr. One Citizenship person, to just go into some random European embassy and be like, oh yeah, well, my dad or my granddad was from here, so can you just please give me a citizenship? And then they just get, oh my god.
Yeah. All right. Perhaps you're not indigenous.
Perhaps we could try that with Palestinians trying to get EU citizenship as well. I'm not sure that would go quite as well. Let's drop into an Israeli headline here. Hamas laid a genocide trap for Israel. That's the headline, and it's from Haaretz, the most left-wing Israeli publication going.
Oh,
they made us do genocide. They were so sneaky by attacking us, and we've fallen into their trap by doing a genocide. It's really their fault that this has happened.
Abuser logic.
Yeah,
you're making me hit you, right? If you I was gonna say the most left wing. There's no left wing in Israel. There's no left wing. 93% of the population, according to polling, believes that they had not used enough firepower on Gaza. There is no left wing. The vast majority of the left is a fucking social democratic joke that wants a more egalitarian ethno-state. They don't care about the indigenous Palestinians or anything else, or equal rights and whatnot. The smallest sliver that actually exists happened to be the radical left, meaning Marxists, and these people are usually ostracized in society, treated as like some sort of like, oh, you're an Arab lover, this slur, n-word, you're a traitor to, you're a self-hating Jew, all this kind of stuff. You don't need to bring in talk of left and right. The left wing in Israel is like the left wing in the US, like what's currently widely understood as the left wing. I mean, basically left liberals at the very best.
Yeah. Let's go on to foreign policy here. I love this one for so many reasons, but the title alone is just perfect, and also the subtitle. The Houthis have declared war on the environment. Subtitle: The Green Movement must speak out about pollution from Red Sea maritime terrorism, which will devastate livelihoods and the oceans.
Bruh, the U.S. is the U.S. military is the biggest polluter on Earth.
You don't even need to go that far. Hasn't like wasn't like 1 month into the Israeli onslaught on Gaza, more emissions have been released than all of like industry or something in a year. Some ridiculous amount of, like if they really cared, then you wouldn't be sending weapons to Ukraine. All right, I'm just gonna say that much. You wouldn't be sending weapons to Israel. You'd be trying your best to solve all this stuff through diplomatic solutions. But all right,
dude, that's literally just green fucking eco-fascism. Dude, we need a new green SS division, for the Browns are committing global warming. We must go and cleanse, my brother. Yes, indeed, for the environment, brother, for the environment. I live for this. I swear to God.
Get some solar panels on those tanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love it because it's just such a beautiful, convoluted way of trying to confuse enough well-meaning liberal types who are maybe not paying enough attention to actually hate Yemen and support Israel. The Houthis, by the way, is the other name for Ansar Allah, who very quickly decided that they would try and block the Red Sea to Israeli maritime shipping and Israeli military to try to enact some sort of cost on Israel for its genocide in Palestine. And they said they would just lift the blockade even if Israel stops killing Palestinians and calls a ceasefire, and that's all they wanted.
That's genuinely so cool to see a country that has suffered so much and has so much to lose being so close by that they're willing to do that, and all these other countries around the world are like, hopefully you guys figure it out.
One of my all-time favorite publications, and by favorite I mean terrible, is Bloomberg, the
I love
business
it.
paper. They released, it was actually their editorial board that released this. This one's not exactly about Palestine, but it's more about the general dangers in the world right now because of wars going on. They said, and this is the headline, the US needs tactical nukes to keep the peace. Russia and China are embarked on rapid nuclear buildup. Deterring them requires the US to upgrade its arsenal. So there we go, nukes for peace.
Nukes for peace, baby. Classic. But no nukes for peace for the other guys that wanna
deter the United States.
Yeah, wanna deter the United States. No, those are bad nukes. Okay, these are good nukes. Same like as this is bad global warming. This is good global warming. Now repeat: good nukes, bad nukes. Good global warming, bad global warming. Good boy. Good boy. Here's some, what's the opposite of she-bucks? Just dollars.
Just dollars.
Yeah.
Right, we haven't talked too much about just the ridiculous framing of Israeli attacks on Palestine. I guess we've been talking about that a little bit earlier, but let's just throw one of those in from the Washington Post. Now, let's remember that they are talking about the Flower Massacre here, whereby the IDF killed more than 100 Palestinians, all unarmed, as they were trying to get food rations because they were starving, of course, because Israel was starving them. As I said before, more than 700 people were injured in this and well over 100 people were killed. The Washington Post's headline was, "Chaotic aid delivery turns deadly as Israeli and Gazan officials trade blame."
Jesus.
Honestly, that's better than I would have expected for them. At least they said Israeli in there somewhere.
Hey, a blast went off in refugee camp. I wonder who did it. In an active war where only one side has an air force. What? I wonder.
Bullet mysteriously enters child's head in oh God, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this one is that, like, I used to do deliveries, right? And quite a lot of those were quite chaotic, honestly, when I was on my bicycle. But I didn't manage to kill like 140 people while I was doing it. In fact, I killed
Funny
nobody,
that.
So.
Amateur.
Okay, how about the Wall Street Journal again? Again, Wall Street Journal, absolute trash publication. That's just how it is. Welcome to Dearborn, which is in Michigan. America's jihad capital.
Oh my God. How could... you got to give us more details.
Dearborn in Michigan is a city which I believe has the highest concentration of Arab Americans or something like that, amongst a bunch of other Michigan cities. And also Michigan was the state that spearheaded the vote non-committed thing, basically, when it comes to Biden, to basically try to get across the fact that we won't support the Democrats if they support genocide, blah, 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 blah. We're going to punish Genocide Joe for this. That's why. But now, because they're Arabs and a good bunch of them are also Muslims, it's the jihad capital of the United States.
What's it called? Deerhorn?
Dearborn.
Dearborn. Like Dearborn? Oh man, I could do so much worse. Dearborn or Camelborn? Jihad Camel.
Oh my God.
Oh, I'm sorry, but yeah.
Cancelled yet again.
Dearborn is where Rashida Tlaib, for example, represents. So there's a really big Arab American population there, and so of course they're being smeared as pro-Hamas or pro-whatever jihadists because they are marching in support of the Palestinian population who are being ethnically cleansed as we speak. And of course, it's that trick of equating support for the Palestinian cause with terrorism. And we've seen this time and time again. If we go back decades, for example, if you marched against the Iraq War, you were actually in the pocket of Saddam Hussein, or if you didn't want the US to invade Libya, that you were actually best friends with Colonel Gaddafi or whatever. It's just a classic trick that you do to smear opponents, and this one has more than a hint of racism about it as well.
But I remember Rashida, she had a Palestinian flag or something outside her office or something like that, and then there's this big fucking stink that was made about it. Oh, this is a flag of another high, you're supposed to only represent the United States. Moving aside the fact that people are receiving tens of millions of dollars from a Zionist lobbying body, nobody mentions that, but moving that aside, weren't there several American politicians that would come in like to the House of Representatives dressed in IDF uniforms, despite the fact that they've never served in the IDF and they're not Israeli citizens.
Yeah,
they're wearing the military uniform of another country while they're
another country. Yes.
Oh my God. Oh Jesus Christ. Yeah,
Alan, I know I did this. Like I pushed you to reading this, but I'm hating my fucking idea right now. Okay.
This is always your fault, Hugo, that you keep making us do this.
Okay, I'll give you one last one then, since you got Pink. Yeah, it sounds like you're going to have an aneurysm in a second. Right. Okay, headline. Urging Israel to use restraint is to deny Gazans their only escape from hell.
What?
And the sub-headline is, as long as Hamas terrorists dominate, there can be no liberty, freedom, or security for anyone. So the argument here is you have to let Israel just completely devastate Palestine or wherever, because if not, Hamas will continue to be a force there, and Hamas are just the source of all people's problems in Palestine. Of course, you know, if you actually ask people in that part of the world where their problems come from, they're generally not saying from Hamas, they're saying from the occupation, from the genocide, from, you know...
I would have guessed the bombs,
yeah, exactly. Having their house blown to smithereens. It's like, you know, people aren't like, oh, damn, I buried a 9th relative this week. Damn, Hamas.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's no Palestinians to vote for Hamas, Hamas won't be re-elected. So that's exactly what the fucking article entails.
That's the subtext of every Israeli slogan. Well, if there were no Palestinians, well... There you go.
Exactly.
Well, we're coming up on 250 years for the United States, so maybe we'll get a twofer. Israel won't survive long without the United States support.
I mean, with or without, it's not gonna. It's a done deal, regardless.
True. Yeah, they burned all their goodwill. Yep.
Goodwill Lamau, as if they. I know it's an American phrase.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was never any goodwill to begin with. Things these sort of things have a tendency of correcting themselves, right? Resistance movements don't just die, and killing people has a magical ability of just like strengthening the resistance. I wonder how. You'd think if you all of a sudden just manage to kill several members of every single Palestinian family. The people who are left over would not, somehow start supporting resistance movements.
If you blew up my entire bloodline when I'm 7 years old, as soon as I can hold a gun, my first order of business is to start Hamas too. Come on, like
electric boogaloo.
It's like the best alternative, or the best parallel I can give is, when you're driving somewhere and then somebody cuts you off and they're just being dickish about it.
Yeah.
And that momentary rage you have inside yourself before you realize, I need to let this go. Why am I angry about this? This is silly, right? If you can get that angry about somebody cutting you off, can you imagine how angry you'd get if somebody killed half your family?
Yeah.
And was doing it like this is a systematic thing. They're saying it. Their historical, documentation completely outlines several plans for the complete annihilation, not of only half your family, your entire family, right? And there's evidence of property and other stuff that they've stolen from you, right? Mm-hmm. You wouldn't think that this would engender a particular distaste. Especially when you're occupying, seriously, it's it's one wrong step after the other. They're so blinded by their genocidal intent that they don't realize that. Whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the disservice to them that they're not smarter about the genocide that they're trying to carry out. But all right.
Yeah, history will take its course.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. And then afterwards, the United States will, if it still exists, will pat itself on its back and be like, well, actually, no, we want to. We were always for the founding of a Palestinian state. What are you talking about?
Rinse and repeat with the next project. Yep. All right, well, there y'all go, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this very positive episode of the Deprogram. Alan, as always, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on. The next time we have you on for the 5th time, we promise it'll just be a shit-posting episode. We can hang out. We can talk about, I don't know, cats.
Gooning.
Gooning. Yeah, gooning. That sounds nice. Long walks on the beach with our boys.
Next episode is us just gooning. That's it. And it's going to be insanely paywalled, right?
We're not going to do that, dear listener. We are not going to do that. Alan, take a moment to tell us once more where people can find your work, how they can engage with you online.
Well, it was a great pleasure talking to you again. Yeah, you can find all my stuff over at mintpressnews.com, and you can find my personal social media. I'm most active on Twitter, or maybe you call it X by now. That's at Alan R. MacLeod. MacLeod is spelt MacLeod. You can find me on Instagram as well, Alan R. MacLeod, and I'm also on Telegram. I've got a Telegram channel called something like News from Alan MacLeod. So plenty of options if you want to follow me.
All those links and invitations for Telegram will be in the description.
All right, brilliant. Thank you again, Alan. We'd also like to thank our lovely patrons without whom we could not do this show. You are the shiny, wet, warm, gooey lifeblood of the show. So thank you all very much. If you're not a patron yet, do consider signing up. We've got lots of perks for you. Bonus episodes, exclusive episodes, access to our completely normal and not deranged at all Discord server, and even chats with us once a month. Thank you all for listening. This has been the Deprogram. I'm JT.
I'm Hakeem.
I'm Yugopnik.
And I'm Alan. Damn, I was so tempted to say, and I'm gooning, but I
Yes! Yes!
There we go. We got it.